I'm going to start with Rosemary Franks. I'll introduce Rosemary. She's the Director of Caterpillar House Occasional Care Centre. Rosemary is the mother of 4 children and the grandmother of 6. You lucky woman, that's fantastic. She's a 5th generation Australia from predominantly Anglo heritage. Her childhood was spent in a remote farming region surrounded by World War II veterans and families. Diversity was non-existent during her formative years. It was pretty much a monoculture. Today, however, she has much more knowledge and experience of the myriad varietal formations of each human body and the effect that each person's upbringing can have on their understandings and behaviours into their future. Rosemary has worked in family daycare, long daycare and in TAFE Early Childhood Teaching, but for the past 18 years she's been Director Teacher of a 28-place occasional childcare centre in Coffs Harbour, New South Wales Mid North Coast. Caterpillar House has an extensive history of welcoming newly arrived migrants and refugee families, and this reputation also attracts a higher percentage of other NESB families. This results in up to 20 different languages at one time amongst our children. Most years the centre has enrolled at least one child with a diagnosed disability, if not several at one time, and the service also takes referrals from support services like the Women's Refuge and Family Services. And the service was set up by families and is a community-based service. So please welcome Rosemary. Thank you. Where's our timing people here? So
Okay.
Just have to be nice and strict there, okay?
Thank you. Oh, I've got my name up there. It's very exciting to be here. I do feel so honoured to be invited. Our service as an occasional care service is in the minority as a service type, and for that reason I feel extra honoured to be invited to speak here today. This morning when people were arriving, I was standing outside watching people arrive, and the welcome that we were all given was exceptional. The people who are putting on this conference live and breathe their own story, and you have seen demonstrated today how inclusion works in practice. So occasional childcare is a different service type to most. Our particular service works by hourly care, so people can be coming in and out of our service at any time of the day. Every single week we have new enrolments, and for this reason we need to be good at welcoming people, making them feel relaxed in our service and feeling confident about leaving their children with us in a very short amount of time. Our years of experience doing this, I've discussed with staff before I came to speak, what is it that we've learnt from doing this for this length of time with such a variety of clientele and their needs and wants. And some of the things that were mentioned this morning by our guest speakers is what we've come down to, and I'll just change to the next slide. I'm not very good at this. So these are my key points for today. The first one is about making assumptions. Over the years, I've found myself doing this. I don't beat myself up for it because it's a natural progression of how your brain works, that you need to categorise what you're dealing with in life, and people come into that as well. So we just have to be really aware that we do that, and to try and keep a hold on when you're doing that, is that a correct assumption? And time again, through my experience, I've found out that I've jumped to some assumption that was totally incorrect, and I've found out later the long way. And this is going to be a natural thing that will happen, especially in our type of care, where it takes a little bit longer to get to know your families and your children. So my first point is to be careful not to put the child inside your box of assumptions. The second one is to get to know the child's everyday life as an individual. All of this ties Sorry, I'm not very used to public speaking. I'm making noises. All of this ties back to the ELF, and all of the research and curriculum that you've ever had to deal with will tell you to consider the child as an individual, that child's circumstance and needs and family structure and everything else that impacts on that child's life. To work effectively with the child, you really do need to continue to engage and ask questions and observe and notice what's going on in their day-to-day life with their particular families. The third one is to follow your services policies. They've been, all your policies are based on good research. That's what they're there for. If for some reason you're finding your policy is not suiting particular families or individuals that you're catering to, then you may need to review those policies. Go and do a bit more research, get the information that's going to suit that person. Over the years, we've had different cultural groups come into our centre, and we've had to ask, and they've had certain requests, and we've had to ask ourselves, our policy says we can't do what it is they're requesting. They're saying, I don't want my child to play in the sandpit, for example. So we have to then go back and review what is it that they don't like about sandpit play, and is it something that's justifiable, or should we change our policy, or should we stand by our policies and explain to the parents why it is that we think sandpit play is effective and good for their child's development. And the last point is quite obvious: to use every support at your disposal. So each time we'd have a new culture or disability, a child with a disability or gender issue was mentioned earlier. We have plenty of same-sex parents use the service that we're unfamiliar with. The first thing you do is educate yourself. Once you've done that, still come back to that individual child and family and make sure you understand what it is that they want. All the research in the world is not going to help you with individual children and individual families. So, for example, a couple of quick examples. We have an Aboriginal child whose favourite toy from home is a doll, and the doll has white skin. It doesn't have the darker skin. And it's not our place to say, oh, you're an Aboriginal child, here, quickly have an Aboriginal doll to cuddle. That's not our place. The parents are more than happy for that child. So you can go a little bit too far with political correctness. A Muslim family requested and asked could they bring birthday cake for their child, and bring in a family member that happened to be visiting at that particular time to celebrate their child's birthday. It wasn't our place to tell them what their religious beliefs tell them to do about birthdays. If that was their choice, then you need to consider, can we do that within our service? Will our policies allow us to? And is it allowing them to be who they want to be? So there were some trigger questions that we were sent to consider. What are your keys to inclusion? The same as earlier speakers have said: respect, acceptance, understanding and self-education. How do you celebrate diversity? Various ways that are mentioned here. How do you ensure inclusion is holistic and not tokenistic? So you research, you consult, you seek support and you evaluate at team meetings. Years ago, when we had a whole group of a particular culture come to the service, we went straight to the bicultural support people, and this is how this photo that's here behind me now has become part of their the image of their service. This was taken at my centre. Thank you. And the last question, gone too far. Do you have any success stories that you would like to share? So the return bookings and recommendations are the obvious one, but just a brief story. To be ready to come here the other day, I went into a hair salon that I hadn't recently been to get my hair cut. And there serving me was a past client whose child is now 15. And most of the time she spent while we were chatting, while she was trimming my hair, was to tell me how close a friendship her daughter and 2 other children who had attended that many years ago to my service are still maintained, that they still, even though they go to different schools and things have happened in their lives since, what a close friendship they still have. This lady is an Aboriginal lady, and the other 2 children were from 2 other cultures as well. So I felt quite effective and quite honoured that she shared that with me on that day. Thank you for listening.